There's a way to look at addiction that most people never hear. It isn't just about willpower or discipline. Through a Jungian lens, there's a useful explanation for why we get stuck, and once you see it, your options change. I'll walk you through it, and then share a practical framework you can use. We'll challenge common assumptions using a Jungian lens. No silver bullets, but a clearer map. Picture a composite patient in early adulthood, drawn from Jungian case patterns in modern therapy, promising himself again that tomorrow will be different. He's been told his whole life to just have more willpower, to just stop, to think before you act. Sound familiar? Jung saw something different. As he watched patient after patient describe the same ancient war happening inside them, a battle between what they want and what they truly need, between comfort and courage, between the parts of themselves they show the world and the parts they've locked away, he realized he wasn't looking at people who were weak. He was looking at people with extraordinary psychological capabilities that no one had bothered to understand. You probably don't realize that most of your life is shaped by this same ancient war happening inside you right now. Imagine you're alone in your room. The world is asleep. You feel it again, that familiar itch, that quiet pull towards something that promises to make the pain go away. You know it won't last, but for a moment, you just want relief. You light the cigarette, you open the app, you pour the drink. You lose yourself for a little while, hoping you can forget what you're trying so hard not to feel. But after the high comes the crash, the shame, the silent promise to never do it again. And then the question that haunts you, why do I keep doing this, even when I know how it ends? Most people think addiction is about the substance or behavior itself. They focus on willpower, discipline, saying no. Through a Jungian lens, the focus shifts, less on the object of the urge, more on what we're trying to move away from. And the thing you're running from isn't what you think it is. Jung saw addiction not as weakness, but as a symptom, a message from the parts of yourself that have been silenced. As he observed in his work, people will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid confronting the deeper aspects of their psyche. Cravings aren't just chemistry. They can function like signals, imperfect messages about unmet needs or avoided emotions. Think about it. If you were perfectly content, perfectly whole, what would you need to numb? What would you need to escape? Cravings are messengers from the parts of yourself you've rejected, the emotions you've denied, the dreams you've abandoned. Jung called this your shadow, but not the way most people understand it. Your shadow isn't evil. It's simply everything about yourself you've learned to hide, deny, or push away, because somewhere along the way, you decided these parts weren't acceptable. Maybe it's your anger, your sadness, your wildness, your creativity, your need for connection, your right to say no, your ability to set boundaries, your permission to protect your energy. Here's a practical reframing. Many people suppress strengths as well as pain. From a Jungian perspective, disowned vitality often leaks out through symptoms. For many people struggling with addiction, they had suppressed not their darkness, but their light, their power, their ability to trust their own perceptions. This is why willpower fails. You're trying to push a beach ball underwater. The harder you press, the more it fights back. Eventually, it explodes to the surface, stronger than before. You can't white-knuckle your way out forever, because you're fighting the wrong battle. Jung argued that some symptoms, what he called neuroses, can act like clumsy self-corrections. Through that lens, some compulsive patterns may be attempts to rebalance. Your shadow is trying to restore balance in the only way it knows. The businessman who can't stop drinking isn't just seeking alcohol. The part of him that's been forced to be responsible and controlled all day is desperate to feel alive, spontaneous, real. The woman who can't stop eating sweets isn't just craving sugar. She's seeking the comfort and kindness she's not getting anywhere else in her life. A composite example. A successful executive who promised himself every morning he'd stop drinking, then found himself at the bar every evening as if pulled by an invisible tide. Traditional approaches focused on the drinking. A Jungian approach focused on what happened right before the urge appeared. What they discovered changed everything. This man had spent his entire life being what others expected, the reliable employee, the responsible provider, the perfect son. But he possessed what I'd call advanced emotional intelligence. He could sense people's hidden pain, predict relationship problems months before they surfaced, and feel the emotional temperature of entire rooms. The problem wasn't his ability, it was that he'd been gaslighted into believing his perceptions were wrong. Every time he voiced what he sensed, the family secret, the relationship red flag, the person's hidden agenda, he was shut down, called too sensitive, or accused of causing drama. So he learned to suppress not his darkness, but his light, his power, his ability to trust his own perceptions. The drinking wasn't about alcohol. It was his psyche's rebellion against a life where he'd systematically learned to doubt his most sophisticated psychological capability. In his drunk state, he became everything his sober self wouldn't allow: emotional, vulnerable, spontaneous, real, and most importantly, trusting of his own perceptions. The addiction wasn't only destroying his life, it was also a misguided attempt to protect something vital by forcing him to confront the parts of himself he'd abandoned. But here's where a Jungian approach helps. It didn't just help this man understand his drinking, it helped him reclaim psychological strengths, what I'll call his psychological superpowers. His right to trust his perceptions, to set boundaries without apology, and to use his emotional intelligence strategically. They started with something I call the recognition earthquake. This man had to confront a terrifying truth. He'd been right all along. Every red flag he ignored, every gut feeling he dismissed, every time he was told he was imagining things, he wasn't. The drinking didn't disappear overnight, but it began to lose its compulsive grip. When he did drink, it was from choice rather than desperation, and increasingly, he found that other activities satisfied the underlying needs just as well, if not better. Drawing on Jung's alchemical reading, the poison can contain information needed for healing if you know how to read the message. Your addiction may carry the clues you need to heal. Stay with me, because in the next part, I'll reveal a Jungian-inspired 3-stage practice: recognition, amplification, and integration, borrowing real Jungian methods, amplification, and active imagination toward individuation. And at the end, you'll discover the hidden truth that makes all the difference. Think of the unconscious like a vast ocean, and your conscious will like a small boat. If you only focus on rowing harder, you'll get exhausted and get nowhere. But if you learn to read the waves, if you understand what storms are coming, you can navigate with far less struggle. This is Jung's genius. Instead of fighting your cravings, you learn to decode them. Instead of seeing them as enemies, you recognize them as messengers carrying vital information about what's missing in your life. Think about your own patterns for a moment. When do your cravings hit hardest? Is it when you're perfectly happy and content? Or is it when you're stressed, lonely, bored, angry, or feeling some other emotion you'd rather not experience? This isn't coincidence. It's your shadow trying to communicate. Jung developed what he called individuation, the lifelong journey towards psychological wholeness, and we can apply its spirit here. When it comes to breaking free from addiction, this process can transform your relationship with your impulses entirely. Stage 1. Recognition. This isn't just recognizing that you have a problem, it's recognizing the ancient war underneath. What emotions, situations, or thoughts consistently trigger your cravings? What are you actually seeking when you reach for your escape of choice? But here's what I find most crucial. What perceptions, insights, or parts of yourself have you learned to distrust? What abilities have you suppressed because others told you they were too much or wrong? Here's how to begin this recognition right now. The next time you feel a craving, don't fight it and don't give in to it. Instead, pause and ask yourself, what was I just thinking about? What was I just feeling? What situation am I in right now? And most importantly, what truth am I trying to avoid? You might notice that you reach for your phone when you feel lonely. You might realize that you overeat when you feel overwhelmed. You might discover that you shop when you feel inadequate. But dig deeper. You might also discover that you numb yourself when you sense something others can't see, when you feel too much, when your emotional intelligence picks up information that others dismiss. Jung believed in the transformative power of naming. What you can name, you can begin to understand and work with. Instead of just feeling the urge, try naming what's behind it. This is anxiety. This is loneliness. This is the part of me that sees what others can't see. This is the part of me that's tired of doubting myself. Stage 2, amplification. Many people report what I call the boundary revolution during this stage. They develop selective empathy, the ability to feel everything while choosing what deserves their emotional investment. They stop absorbing other people's anxiety, stop explaining away red flags, and start trusting their first impressions more. Another composite example, someone who couldn't stop eating sweets no matter how much they tried to diet or use discipline. When therapists look closely at what happens right before the cravings, they discover this person reaches for sweets whenever they feel criticized or judged, which happens frequently because they have an uncanny ability to sense people's true intentions. The sweetness wasn't about sugar, it was about comfort, about giving themselves the kindness they weren't receiving from a world that constantly told them their perceptions were wrong. Once they understood this, they could address the real issue. They started trusting their emotional intelligence. They began setting boundaries with people who made them feel bad for their sensitivity. They found other ways to comfort the part of them that saw too much. Many people report that others around them panic during this stage. Family members who relied on these individuals as emotional dumping grounds suddenly had to deal with their own feelings. Friends who took advantage of their endless patience found themselves facing clear, calm boundaries. The craving for sweets didn't vanish immediately, but it transformed from compulsion to choice. And increasingly, they discovered that other forms of self-validation satisfied the underlying need even better than sugar ever had. Stage 3, integration. This stage is what I find most remarkable. This is where you consciously provide for the needs your addiction was trying to meet. You develop new rituals, new habits, new ways of being that honor the rejected parts of yourself without destroying your life. These individuals don't become cold or cynical. They become more consciously feeling, able to sense deeply while choosing wisely. But here's something crucial that most people miss. Integration isn't about perfection, it's about wholeness. It's about creating space in your life for all of who you are, including the parts you've been taught to hide, especially your ability to perceive truth that others miss. Jung often used the metaphor of alchemy for this process. The ancient alchemists claimed to turn base metals into gold. Jung realized they were actually describing psychological transformation. The base metal of your addiction contains the gold of your authentic self, but it requires conscious work to extract it. This alchemical process isn't comfortable. It requires you to sit with feelings you'd rather avoid, to face truths you'd rather deny, to trust perceptions others have taught you to doubt. But the discomfort is temporary, and the freedom that comes from integration lasts. Now, I want to address what might be bothering you right now. You might be thinking, this sounds profound, but what do I actually do when I'm in the grip of a craving? How do I apply this when willpower feels impossible and the urge feels overwhelming? Jung wrote about holding the tension of opposites. In practice, that means staying with the urge long enough to learn from it before you act. When the craving arises, instead of immediately acting on it or fighting it, try to simply be with it. Notice what it feels like in your body. Notice what thoughts accompany it. Notice what emotions are present. Notice what truths are trying to emerge. This might sound passive, but it's incredibly active. You're gathering intelligence about your own psyche. You're learning the language your system uses to communicate. And you're building tolerance for discomfort, which is essential for any real change. As you hold this tension, you can begin what Jung called active imagination, actually dialoguing with the craving. Ask it, what do you need right now? What are you trying to tell me? What truth am I avoiding? What part of me needs to be honored? Sometimes the answers will surprise you. The part that wants to drink might actually want permission to feel deeply in a world that demands emotional numbness. The part that wants to eat might actually want to trust its own hunger, not just for food, but for authentic connection. The part that wants to scroll endlessly might actually want to honor its ability to sense what others are really feeling. Once you know what you're really seeking, you can experiment with other ways to meet that need. If you want to feel deeply, maybe you write in a journal or create art instead of drinking. If you want authentic connection, maybe you reach out to someone who values your sensitivity. If you want to honor your perceptual abilities, maybe you start trusting your first impressions about people and situations. This isn't about finding perfect substitutes. It's about developing a conscious relationship with your needs and creative ways of meeting them. Over time, this builds what therapists call ego strength, the ability to choose based on your deeper values rather than immediate impulses. Don't click away now, because the most powerful part is still coming. Jung understood that this process isn't linear. You'll have setbacks. You'll have days when you fall back into old patterns. This isn't failure, it's information. What was different about the day you slipped? What needs weren't being met? What truths were you avoiding? Use this to refine your understanding and strengthen your approach. He argued that consciously engaging inner conflict can deepen psychological maturity, and many in recovery report similar growth. Your addiction, as painful as it's been, is actually evidence of your psyche's refusal to settle for a life that's less than you deserve. Think about the people in your life who seem to coast through without ever facing their shadows. They might appear more stable, but Jung noticed they often lack the depth, compassion, and wisdom that comes from conscious struggle. Your addiction has been a harsh teacher, but it's shown you where you're vulnerable, where you're unbalanced, where you're not living authentically. Now you have the opportunity to use that information not to judge yourself, but to transform yourself. The wound and the gift are found in the same place. Your greatest struggle is pointing you toward your greatest strength. Clinicians often report striking pattern recognition after integration. Anecdotally, people describe reading dynamics faster and setting cleaner boundaries. These individuals often start attracting different types of people. Manipulative personalities may begin avoiding them instinctively, while emotionally healthy people feel drawn to their authenticity. Call this the authenticity magnet effect. Integrated people naturally repel dysfunction and attract health. Plenty report better relationships and work fit once boundaries and purpose are aligned. It's not magic, just clearer self-use of attention and energy. But what I find most remarkable, they don't become manipulative or cruel despite having these capabilities. Instead, they become benevolent guardians of their empathy, people who can see through everyone, but use this ability to protect and heal rather than exploit. He emphasized meaning and purpose. Modern research also links purpose with better mental health and recovery outcomes. This makes perfect sense. If your life feels meaningful and engaging, you're less likely to want to escape from it. If you have goals and values that truly matter to you, you're more motivated to make choices that support rather than undermine them. But meaning can't be imposed from the outside. It emerges from living authentically, from expressing your true nature, from honoring the very parts of yourself your addiction has been trying to protect. As you integrate your shadow, as you trust your perceptions and meet your authentic needs in healthy ways, life naturally becomes more engaging. And as life becomes more meaningful, the appeal of escape diminishes. Many people discover that their addiction was actually pointing them toward ignored needs or even a calling. The businessman eventually found new ways to express his authentic self and emotional intelligence, using his experience to help others. The person with sugar cravings discovered that their sensitivity was actually a gift that helped them understand and heal others' pain. You don't necessarily need to make dramatic changes. Sometimes meaning emerges from small shifts in how you approach your existing life. But the key is listening to what Jung called the voice of the self, the deeper wisdom that knows what you need for genuine fulfillment. This voice often speaks through symptoms, including addictions, trying to guide you toward a more complete way of being. The people who benefited from your old patterns will resist your transformation. This is normal. Not everyone wants you to become more conscious, more authentic, more integrated. Some relationships were built on your imbalance, your availability for emotional labor, your willingness to abandon yourself for others' comfort. But temporary loneliness is preferable to permanent self-betrayal. As you become more authentic, you naturally attract people and situations that align with your true self rather than your addicted self. Here's a hard truth from this perspective. Your addiction isn't your enemy. It's your guide to your own hidden potential. Every compulsion is energy that could be redirected. Every craving contains information about what you need to feel whole. Every relapse teaches you something about your own psychology. But more than that, your addiction might be protecting abilities you didn't even know you had. Your sensitivity isn't your weakness. When properly integrated, it becomes your wisdom, your strength, and your gift to a world desperately in need of emotional truth. The freedom you've been seeking outside yourself has been waiting inside yourself all along. Your deepest wisdom knows this. The only question is, are you ready to stop fighting yourself and start integrating yourself? This isn't instant freedom, it's a map for real change. Results vary and the work is personal. The path is clear. Recognize the patterns beneath your cravings, understand what they're really seeking, integrate the rejected parts of yourself through conscious choice rather than compulsive action. Trust your perceptions, create meaning through authentic living, hold the tension of growth, trust the process of becoming who you truly are. Jung wrote that becoming who you truly are is the privilege of a lifetime. Your addiction, painful as it's been, might just be the unlikely guide leading you home to yourself. And once you're home, once you're whole, once you trust your own psychological gifts, the compulsive seeking can transform into conscious choosing. You don't have to live at the mercy of impulses you don't understand. You don't have to repeat patterns that leave you feeling ashamed and defeated. The ancient war inside you can end, not through victory of one side over the other, but through integration of both sides into a more complete, authentic you. Your shadow contains not just your rejected pain, but also your rejected power, creativity, aliveness, and extraordinary perceptual abilities. Your cravings are trying to tell you something vital about what you need to feel truly alive. And your journey through addiction, conscious as you're willing to make it, can become the very foundation of a more meaningful, integrated, and free existence. The breakthrough is closer than you think. The freedom you've been seeking outside yourself has been waiting inside yourself all along. Your deepest wisdom knows this. The only question is, are you ready to stop fighting yourself and start integrating yourself? This isn't instant freedom. It's a map for real change. Results vary, and the work is personal.
The path is clear. Recognize the patterns beneath your cravings, understand what they're really seeking, integrate the rejected parts of yourself through conscious choice rather than compulsive action. Trust your perceptions, create meaning through authentic living, hold the tension of growth, trust the process of becoming who you truly are. Jung wrote that becoming who you truly are is the privilege of a lifetime. Your addiction, painful as it's been, might just be the unlikely guide leading you home to yourself. And once you're home, Once you're whole, once you trust your own psychological gifts, the compulsive seeking can transform into conscious choosing. You don't have to live at the mercy of impulses you don't understand. You don't have to repeat patterns that leave you feeling ashamed and defeated. The ancient war inside you can end, not through victory of one side over the other, but through integration of both sides into a more complete, authentic you. Your shadow contains not just your rejected pain, but also your rejected power, creativity, aliveness, and extraordinary perceptual abilities. Your cravings are trying to tell you something vital about what you need to feel truly alive. And your journey through addiction, conscious as you're willing to make it, can become the very foundation of a more meaningful, integrated, and free existence. The breakthrough is closer than you think. The freedom you seek was always yours to claim. The only thing standing between you and that freedom is the willingness to face the ancient war inside you with curiosity instead of judgment, with integration instead of elimination, with the understanding that your deepest wounds often point toward your greatest gifts. Your sensitivity is your superpower, but only when you own it. You're not broken, overly emotional, or too much. You're operating with advanced psychological equipment in a world that doesn't understand how to use it. Are you ready to stop being a prisoner of your own superpowers and start being their master? The choice has always been yours. Because the world doesn't need fewer sensitive people struggling with addiction. It needs more conscious ones who've transformed their pain into power, their wounds into wisdom, and their compulsions into conscious choice. This is an educational psychological perspective, not medical advice. If addiction is harming your life, seek qualified professional support and local resources.